Here in the meet and greet section, you check for the appropriate lesson ticket and do a hole punch in their ticket. Assure that the student understands the Mountain Passport program and its benefits. During the introduction phase, the student is provided an overview of the various skill development zones, beginning with the boot skill zone, the walking zone, the straight glide zone, the wedge zone, the wedge turning zone, and the on-hill zone. Here in the boot skill zone, the student should identify the rental number on their skis for their own personal use. The student should be checked for comfort and proper use of boots, buckles, etc. The student stands in a good skiing position, holding their poles, boots spaced as wide as their hips and shoulders, hands forward, legs bent at the ankles, and knees causing contact between the leg and the boot tongue. The student should display an athletic stance by flexing and bending their legs and hip joints. The student stands on their turning strips to develop turning movements. Students should practice turning each leg and boot as they would turn their own skis. The student should then practice turning their legs together to a wedge and to a duck walk position. Ask the student to then display the movements on snow off of the strips. The students should display a bow tie in the snow with a successful movement, which represents turning the skis. The student displays turning toes in to a wedge position. The student should display turning toes out to a duck walk position, and then walk on the inside edges of the skis. The student leans their legs and boots to corresponding edges. Hands and shoulders stay level. Sidestep onto the edges. In the walking zone, ask the student to duck walk to the brushes. The student should straddle a brush between their boots and practice small stepping movements in both directions. The student should then place their ski tips on a brush and practice stepping in both directions. The student is asked to then walk through and around the brushes, practicing turning movements. The student is asked to use their poles placed behind their boots for better balance and for appropriate pushing. The student profile should be angled forward of their ski movement with legs in contact with the boot tongue. The student should practice sidestepping movements with their skis on edges. The straight glide zone. Sidestep to the top of the glide lane. The student makes small stepping movements in the glide lane. Students should display good skiing positions with their ankles bent and legs forward, their hands forward, their back bent slightly forward. Skis should be hip and shoulder width apart. If a student has problems stepping into the glide lane, a bullfighter turn may help with the setup. Lengthen the legs by reaching higher and shorten the legs by reaching lower. The students may be asked to increase their balance with small stepping movements. Any or all of these movements will help the student develop better balancing. the Wedge Skill Zone. In the Wedge Skill Zone, the student steps into the glide lane with small stepping movements. The student displays turning their skis to a gliding wedge. Then the student displays turning their skis from a gliding wedge back to parallel and then back to a wedge. The student displays active steering of skis with the same turning movements used to make the boot bow ties. The student displays the ability to make a wedge stop. The bullfighter stance is used for a stable setup. In the wedge turning zone, the student displays the ability to turn their skis in a wedge to a stop. The student displays and practices turning both directions with a continuous movement to a stop. If the student struggles with making a wedge turn to a stop, they should display the ability to make a wedge to a stop. The student should display a tall stance to start the turn and bending of the ankles and knees to finish the turn. In the on-hill and first run zone, the student should review and understand the responsibility code. From the school entrance position to the lifts, students should observe and review lift riding instructions. Pole straps removed from their hands, both poles being held in the middle in one hand. The student stands, one each in the lift loading gates. When the empty chair passes, quickly move forward to load, and here comes the lift. The student prepares to unload by raising the restraining bar and holding their ski tips up. Now, it's very important for the student to understand when the skis can be set down on the unloading platform. Immediately stand up and lean forward with hands and poles out in front. From the top, one student at a time should be asked to display a wedge stop from a short traverse. Each student should then display a wedge turn to a stop from a short traverse in both directions. Terrain management is critical for the student to have a successful first run. Keep the student from directing their skis straight down the hill. Try to keep the student away from double fall lines and approach steeper mounds and pitches from a side traverse. When the student displays the ability to turn to a stop, the remainder of the run will focus on linked turning. Students should display a rising and extending at the start of the turn and a bending and flexing of the legs to finish the turn. A lesson summary should remind the student of the benefits of purchasing a mountain passport, what they should practice for the day, and if someone is having turning problems, they're certainly invited back into the Discovery Zone to relearn how to turn and to take another run with the next group.